There we go. Thank you so much for coming to Urban Noise and Noise Cameras with Nick Ferenchak and myself. So this is presented by No More Noise Toronto, creating more healthy and inclusive social cities. So I'd like to know who is in the audience. And with that, I'm going to launch a quick poll while I go through the rest of the slides. The answers are anonymous, so I do hope that you do reply and let us know who's in the room. And I'm going to move that over. There we go. Okay. So thank you so much for attending. So tonight we're gonna talk about urban noise and why reducing noise is important. We're also going to talk then about Nick's going to share his automated vehicle noise enforcement opportunities and challenges, and then there's going to be some Q&A. Please do put your Q&A questions in the, please put your questions in the Q&A box. The chat has been disabled. And so there's two parts to this webinar tonight. We're going to have the first part with Nick. And then if you have a few extra minutes, you're invited to watch an 8-minute documentary and learn more about the No More Noise Toronto campaign. And so as you know, the webinar is being recorded. So a link will be sent to all attendees and posted on my YouTube channel. So we have myself, I'm the founder of No More Noise Toronto, which is a local campaign here in Toronto, but we understand that we are actually joining a global movement against noise, excessive vehicle noise. And then we have Nick Ferenchak, who I hope you can see on the screen. He's the assistant professor at the University of New Mexico, president at Not Allowed, center director at Center for Pedestrian and Bicyclist Safety. The QR code beside Nick's name will take you to his website, and the QR code beside mine will take you to the No More Noise Toronto website. So next, let's see who's in the house. I'm going to end the poll and show
Ingrid, we had somebody say they can't hear you. I'm not. Can everybody else hear Ingrid?
I can hear Ingrid.
Okay.
You can?
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Okay, thank you.
But also, you mentioned a QR code. You're not, we can't see your slides if you're trying to share.
Okay, here we go. Screen 2. Share.
Okay, there we go.
Excellent. I am so glad for team effort. My apologies, everyone. Thanks, Nick. Thank you. So who's in our audience tonight? We had 16 people participate, and most are members of the public who are annoyed by vehicle noise where I live. And then we've got people curious about the technology, one person of influence, and then somebody who's an engineer, urban planner who studies sound, etc. So thank you so much for taking that, for completing that survey. So here are the QR codes. For myself, this is to the nomorenoisetoronto.com website, and this QR code is for Nick's Not Allowed website. Okay, so why reducing noise is important? Reducing noise is important because it's the #2 urban environmental health hazard, and we have no defense against it. According to Tor OEMO, it doesn't matter if you are annoyed or not. Noise over 55 decibels negatively impacts your health. And the last bullet point that you can see there is from the World Health Organization, and this is their long list of negative outcomes from excessive noise. So this is from one of Tor OEMO's presentations, and basically health affects us 2 ways. It affects us directly and indirectly. So the high impact is, or high noise, has a direct pathway to hearing loss and sleep disturbance, which I myself have suffered from. And then the low impact is this indirect pathway. And this is often the background noise or the noise that we don't actually pay attention to, but still affects us. And this has a disturbance of activities, sleep, communication, and can result in depression and annoyance, but both of them lead to a stress response. And that stress response in our body releases hormones that impact our cardiovascular system, which can eventually lead to strokes and heart attacks. And just in case you're wondering, EVs are not a solution. Dodge has released, they've started marketing their Dodge Charger Daytona, and they are marketing it with 126 decibel roar. So I'm not waiting for EVs to be the solution. I'm waiting for other solutions. And with that, I will stop sharing and pass the screen over to Nick.
Hey, great. Thank you, Ingrid.
Okay.
And can everybody see my slides there?
I can. I'm hoping
I can
everybody
as
else.
well.
Okay, great. So good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me here. Thanks for being here. My name is Nick Ferenchak. My day job is an assistant professor in the civil engineering department at the University of New Mexico, focused on transportation. And I've really been an advocate for cracking down on road noise for probably about 5 years now. And we have some technology that we're trying to roll out. I'd say I'm kind of on the cusp of hopefully going from advocate to pushing this out and actually having it implemented out in the real world. But we're kind of at the in-between there right now. Okay, so just to kind of define the problem that we're talking about, we're not talking about general road noise, the hum of the highway in the background. What our technology and our enforcement approach is really about the exceptionally loud vehicles. So different cities, counties, states have different levels that we'll talk about in a minute, but in general, it's about 80 decibels when measured at 50 feet distance. So we're specifically talking about the exceptionally loud vehicles. We always get people that are concerned members of the public and say, oh, I have a motorcycle. Is my vehicle going to be caught? Am I going to get a ticket from this technology? But all stock vehicles rolling off the line are within legal limits. So the only folks that we are really targeting are the ones that have gone out of their way, modified their vehicle to be above 80 decibels. So even a Harley Davidson off the line should be within the legal limits. So we're just looking at those exceptionally loud vehicles. Won't harp on this anymore, but obviously there's health implications of noise. It's also economic implications for cities, right? People don't want to go and sit at a restaurant if it's on a loud street. People don't, if you have a business, people are going to be less productive if they're constantly being distracted. So there's also economic implications. Last semester, my students had the joy of actually going out and collecting road noise data around the city of Albuquerque in New Mexico. And we correlated that with vehicle speeds and then also safety outcomes of crashes. And we are actually finding a correlation between loud streets, speeding, and then crashes, injuries, and fatalities on those streets. So we're also just now kind of establishing this link between road noise and safety as well. So lots of important implications that we're talking about here. I'm sure everybody in the audience knows there are too many of these vehicles, but just to put some numbers on this, we've done a bit of monitoring around the city of Albuquerque. I imagine that our numbers are around average for city of about 500,000 people. Arterials, so 5-7 lane wide roadways, where we see on average about 15 to 20 vehicles in excess of 80 decibels every single hour. In some neighborhoods, the problem is worse. We've seen up to almost 70 vehicles in a single hour that are above the legal limit. So as everybody knows, it is definitely an issue out there. So luckily, we have a solution. Here it is, right? Just put up a sign that says no loud mufflers and problem solved. Of course, being facetious here, that is not going to work. We need some kind of active enforcement here. The traditional way is sending a police officer out there with a sound level meter, waiting for a loud vehicle to drive by, pulling them over. I mean, that's just very time intensive. We don't have the resources to really pursue that kind of enforcement. There's also risks with that kind of enforcement. When you're sending police officers out there to pull over these loud vehicles, often run into issues with those encounters. So this is just not a really sustainable way of enforcing the noise issue. So what we are really pushing for is automated enforcement of noise on our streets. There is precedent for this. So the picture on the left is automated speed enforcement from pretty close to where I live in Albuquerque. And on the right is automated red light enforcement. So again, sensors detecting speeds of vehicles, capturing a license plate, issuing a ticket, sensors picking up when a vehicle is run through a red light, capturing that license plate, issuing a ticket. Both of these technologies are out there. They're proven. So why can't we do the same thing for noise? Certainly noise is a little more complex, and we'll talk about that in a second, but there is precedent for this automated enforcement. So our solution and what we've been pushing with our company called Not Allowed is at its core pretty simple. So we have a sound level meter that's constantly monitoring the environment, and when the sound level meter exceeds a certain decibel threshold, and that can be set by whatever municipality is using this technology. It could be right at 80 decibels, right at the legal limit, or if you want to even add in a little wiggle room there, you could set it at 85, 90, really whatever you want to set it at. When that decibel threshold is exceeded, it triggers a license plate camera and the vehicle on the roadway is captured. And I will say that I'm kind of throwing out ideas here. This is our approach, but I think there'll be more questions generated than answers throughout this talk. So I'm really looking forward to the Q&A as well here. There are some noise enforcement pilot programs that have been happening. Sorry, I have a US context here. I know many audience members are from Canada. I believe Edmonton, actually quite a few years ago, they're some of the forerunners, I believe. So there are Canadian cities that are testing this technology, but the more established programs, at least in the US, are New York City, Knoxville, Tennessee, Longmont, Colorado, Kirkland, Washington. There's some legislation going through in California as well, and then Albuquerque, New Mexico. We actually will hopefully be running a pilot program. There's been quite a few delays, but hopefully we'll have a pilot program as well. And this is constantly changing. I've been working on this for about 5 years, and the first 3 years, there was really no movement at all. So most of this action has really been happening over the last 2 years or so. I know there's legislation for noise cameras on the desk of the governor of Hawaii. Somebody from Georgia reached out recently, somebody from South Carolina. So this is really starting to pick up, and this map is even a little outdated, even though it's only about 2 months old. Just noting that we will hopefully be having a pilot program for these noise cameras here in Albuquerque. Okay, so kind of the interesting part to me is we have this technology. Like I said, there's precedent for it. The big holdup in my mind is what is going to hold up legally. And there's, in my mind, kind of 3 different levels of ordinances to enforce urban road noise. There's general, what people call noise ordinances, or city zone noise ordinances. Then there's muffler ordinances, and then there's specifically vehicle noise ordinances. And I always really recommend that folks really pursue a solid vehicle noise ordinance. It's very specific to vehicles. So this is what, and I think every city, just about every city, there are actually some cities that don't have any noise ordinances, but this is what most cities have for kind of the noise ordinance for their city. So no person shall make or continue any sound that persistently or continuously results in an exceedance of the following sound level limits. So this is more for like if there's a factory right next to a residential area. It's not so much for a vehicle noise. So persistently or continuously, right? For our issue, vehicle noise, that vehicle drives by, you hear it for 5 seconds, it wakes you up at 3 in the morning, and then it's gone, but it's not persistent or continuous. So these general noise ordinances really aren't going to be enough in my mind. Next, people always mention, well, we have a muffler ordinance. Can we use that to enforce? I think that can be an approach, but I don't think it's going to be quite there. So this is our example here in New Mexico, and at least in the US, most of these are on the state level. So mufflers, prevention of noise. So right off the bat, this is what we're getting at. Everybody knows it's the muffler, it's making noise. The ordinance says every motor vehicle shall at all times be equipped with a muffler in good working order and in constant operation to prevent excessive or unusual noise, and no person shall use a muffler cutout, bypass, or similar device upon a motor vehicle on a highway. So in my mind, again, there's kind of three issues with this approach. Muffler in good working order. Well, people design these mufflers to be loud, right? So it's working, it's supposed to be loud. That's what it was designed for. Excessive or unusual noise, that's pretty subjective. If you ask the owner of the vehicle, they wouldn't say it was excessive. They'd say it's exactly as loud as I want it to be. Also on a highway, what is a highway? Most roads aren't considered highways. So again, this muffler approach, I think, is just still not enough. So I want to show everybody what I think is a really good example of an ordinance that's specifically focused on vehicle noise. And this is from Bernalillo County. This is a county that Albuquerque is in, that I'm in here. So they say no person shall operate a motor vehicle at any time under any conditions of grade, load, acceleration, or deceleration in such a manner to exceed the following noise limits. And then they actually break out different types of vehicles. So I think this is interesting, the kind of flexibility that different municipalities can have. So there's a debate about, do loud motorcycles improve the safety of motorcyclists, right? If that debate is still going on in your municipality, well, then maybe you want to have motorcycles be allowed to make more noise or something like that. So there's more flexibility in this type of ordinance. But also it just says the vehicle cannot make noise, period, right? With the muffler, you would need to prove that the noise was coming from the muffler, which how do you prove that as a vehicle drives by? We all know it is, but how do you prove that to hold up in court, right? This is just wide open. It covers everything. The vehicle cannot make that noise, period. It doesn't matter if it's a muffler, engine braking, stereo, whatever that noise is coming from. If it's coming from that vehicle, it can't be doing that. So in my mind, this is a much better legal approach. That being said, different municipalities, different states are trying different things. But in my mind, this is kind of a good legal backing. And the legal aspect to me is the most important one of the most important factors at this stage. The technology does work, but what's going to hold up in court? We don't want to use some really weak ordinance, start sending out tickets, and the tickets just get shot down and everybody says, oh, noise cameras don't work. So I think we really want to be airtight with this legal aspect at the very beginning stages of this technology here. So that's kind of the legal backing. Now on to the actual technology. So our approach, and I know there's Intelligent Instruments that has some cameras out of the UK. They have a little bit different approach. Our approach here is that we actually separate out the sound level meter from the cameras that are actually capturing the license plate. And the reason for that is, if you look at this ordinance, and most ordinances are structured about the same way, the ordinance says that the noise measurement must be taken a distance not less than 50 feet from the center line of travel. So basically, you can't have that sound level meter right up on the street. You actually have to separate that sound level meter and set it back 50 feet from the road. So that's why we actually have these separate units. The license plate camera is right up on the street, so we can capture that vehicle as it drives by. The sound level meter can be 50 feet. Some municipalities say the measurement must be taken 25 feet. Some say 75 feet. There's a number of different criteria out there, but we actually separate the sound level meter from the camera so we can work with whatever municipality's ordinance is out there. So like I explained before, sound level meter is constantly on, it's constantly monitoring. When that decibel level exceeds whatever threshold the municipality defines, it then triggers that camera that is right on the street to capture the vehicle that is there. Also note that the units are separated, and we actually use wireless communication. So there's not like a wire running 75 feet in this road environment or anything like that. So they are wirelessly talking to each other. In addition, we don't have it quite there yet, but we're hoping to be able to link multiple recording units to the same system. So when that decibel threshold is exceeded, 3 different recording units in this instance would be triggered, so we could actually get recordings for every single leg of this intersection. I think it's a little overkill, but some municipalities have requested that there would be recordings on every single leg of of the intersection being monitored. One thing I want to note, and this is always brought up, what kind of street environment can be monitored? I'll say that right now we prefer to monitor smaller streets. We prefer to really look at one single lane of analysis. Like I was talking about before, with this being such a new technology, we don't want any room for error. So that's why we really like to analyze one single lane of analysis at a time. Obviously, if we look at a 7-lane arterial like this, and there's 10,000 vehicles driving by in a peak hour, we get more captures. But I don't think the technology is quite there to be able to pinpoint exactly which vehicle was making the noise. Of course, we could look at the video and you could tell it was the sports car that's all souped up, but that's not quite going to hold up in court, we believe. So that's why at this early stage, we're really looking at roadway scenarios like this, where we would be analyzing that one single lane of analysis that you can see there with the red arrow. And this particular intersection that we've actually been testing, there is a stop bar. You can kind of see at the bottom third of the page. So there actually is a stop sign here, where as vehicles drive up, they hopefully stop at the stop sign. So every vehicle stops at the stop sign, then it proceeds. And in that way, you kind of get one vehicle at a time. So if there is a trigger, you can be pretty certain which vehicle triggered it as it pulled away from that stop sign. So we don't get that issue of 50 vehicles in a big platoon, which one was making the noise. This kind of scenario, at least for the early stages, I think is going to be best. That being said, other communities are interested in monitoring this kind of scenario. The system would still work, it would still trigger, we would still get video captures, but I think we would have to throw away a lot of those captures. So we get more captures, but our success rate goes way down. Whereas this kind of scenario, our success rate is very, very high, but we're not going to get as many captures. A little bit more information about the technology. So on the left, we have the sound level meter. When that decibel threshold is exceeded, it sends a wireless signal out to the recording units. I mentioned the license plate recording, but there's actually a couple of different pieces of data that we collect. So we're trying to iron all of these components out right now, but we're shooting for 5 different types of recordings for every single capture event. So number 1 is the license plate camera. We're using a license plate camera that's off the shelf. It's designed to capture license plates, day, night, high speeds. So we get really high capture rates. We also have a wide angle camera that you can see right below that. So the license plate camera is really laser focused on the offending vehicle as it drives by. But the wide angle camera is seeing everything else that was going on in the intersection at that time. So maybe there was another motorcycle that was driving through at the same time. We'd want to know everything that was going on in the intersection. So 2 different types of video, and then we have 3 different types of audio. Number 1 is just a basic microphone, so we can actually hear what was making the noise, right? Was that a gunshot that triggered the device? Was it a leaf blower, or was it actually a vehicle? So we can actually hear. We're also getting measurements from the sound level meter, so a decibel reading, number of decibels, and usually our recording events are about 5 seconds in length. With 5 seconds, as that vehicle just drives by, with 5 seconds, the vehicle is already pretty far gone. So yeah, decibel reading as well. And then our third audio output is from a microphone array, and you can see a picture of that at the bottom there. So the microphone array actually has 6 microphones around in a circle, and based on where the noise is coming from, it will actually hit one microphone first. It will hit the next microphone a millisecond later, the next one a millisecond later. And based on those time differences of the different microphones, it can actually detect the direction of arrival of that noise source. So with that, we can tell, for instance, was that noise source moving north? and that would be our lane of analysis. Or maybe we find the noise source was actually moving south, and then it would have been in a different lane. We would throw that recording event out. So that microphone array actually tells us where the noise source is coming from, and that's really going to, I think, kind of make this argument airtight and hopefully help this to hold up in court. I wanted to show something else that's pretty interesting. So some companies, I think mostly out of Europe, are actually putting together these noise heat maps. So cameras that can actually show where the noise is coming from. In general, my understanding is that these are not accredited, certified, basically would not hold up in court. The sound level meter that we're using in our system would hold up in court. I don't think this would. So it's a neat graphic, but all in all, I don't think it quite would be robust enough at this point to really add a lot to the system. So that's a little bit about our approach to the monitoring. Once we've collected data, we've got license plates of offending vehicles, the next step is then, what do you do with that? So what are the enforcement options? And my understanding is that different communities have been taking different approaches to this. Kind of the most basic, and what most communities have been doing, has been just monitoring. They're saying, does the technology work? How much of an issue is this in our community? But they're not actually sending out citations or warnings or anything like that quite yet. Second step would just be sending a warning. That would be pretty easy. That wouldn't have to hold up in court saying, hey, we caught you, please fix the issue. But again, that's not really enforcement quite yet. Number three is something I've heard of. I don't know how successful this would be, but that would be a summons. So some communities are thinking of using this automated technology to establish probable cause and say, we believe that your vehicle, we have it captured here, we believe that your vehicle is in excess of this ordinance or bylaw. We want you to come into this official testing facility and prove to us that your vehicle is within the legal criteria. So in that way, they're not directly enforcing with this automated enforcement, but they're using as probable cause to then bring the vehicles into a more controlled testing facility. So that's, I don't know anybody that's actually doing that quite yet, but that I think is an interesting approach. And then number four is using this technology to just administer fines to the owners of the vehicles. And I say owner of the vehicle because I think that's a really benefit of this issue. Whereas with speeding cameras, you can capture the vehicle speeding, you know the owner of the vehicle, but you don't know who was actually driving that vehicle at that time for speeding. It's more of a whoever was driving was breaking the law. But with the vehicles, if you can capture the vehicle breaking the law in excess noise, you know the owner of that vehicle, they're at fault because it was their vehicle and they modified their vehicle. So directly administering fines to whoever the owner of the vehicle is, that's really, I think, what we're shooting for. I believe New York City has actually been doing that for maybe 3 months now. I've heard that they've had a few people fight the fines and the tickets, but overall, they seem to be sticking. So I think New York City is actually starting to do number 4 and really actually enforce this. So that's really, really exciting. I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about their program. It's been tough for me to kind of get in there and get a contact and figure out how well their program's doing, but it sounds like they are trying to move ahead. So that's a little bit of an overview of kind of our ideas on this technology, the ordinances, the bylaws, possible enforcement strategies, and yeah, I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Nick. That was just a great presentation, and I learned so much, and I'm sure everybody else did too. So with that, I've got a couple questions already set, and I welcome people to put answers or questions in the Q&A. So I'm just going to share my screen again here, and so I can, there we go. So I can share with you all kind of the questions that I thought we would start with. So Nick, you talked a lot about the ordinances. In your opinion, what needs to be done in advance of the camera installation in order for them to be effective?
Yeah, I think just making sure that there's a good bylaw or ordinance that's really, to me, it has objective measurements.
Yeah.
I talked to somebody in Knoxville, Tennessee, who was using the noise camera technology, and it wasn't using the company out of the UK, Intelligent Instruments. They were using their technology, and it seemed like it wasn't quite to where they were hoping it would be. And they were actually going to be going kind of a more subjective route. They're just going to be monitoring and just kind of using a subjective officer's opinion that that was a nuisance, and then issuing tickets just based on nuisance. But to me, for something to really hold up, we need strong objective measurements that we can say this meter is accredited, it's been calibrated, here is the measurement, you were in excess of that. Like, that's really tough to argue with, in my mind.
Yeah, there was Newport, Rhode Island just instituted they updated their ordinance so that it's 85 decibels under acceleration and all of that. So it needs to be, and that's back to that data-centered approach. It's not about what you think, it's about actually what the measurement is. So a question from the audience is, what would be the data stats regarding the violators? Was there some decrease in incidents? So is this something where we see that it is actually effective? Are we at that stage yet?
Yeah, so yeah, I've done a lot of thinking about this. I don't have all the answers, but from my understanding, and we haven't actually implemented our pilot program here in Albuquerque yet, so I can't speak specifically for our community. But with my conversations with New York City, they said that yes, it actually was effective. Right, word gets out that there's noise cameras installed on these corridors, and people, the street racers or whoever it is, vacate those corridors. The issue is that they move to other corridors. So they said that there was really a big push from the politicians as soon as whichever counselor kind of took the initiative and had the first camera installed in their jurisdiction, and it seemed to be a success. Now all of the other counselors are, oh, I want some in my jurisdiction. So yeah, it's kind of a cat and mouse game trying to catch where the folks are moving to. But yeah, it does seem to be a success. But then next step is we need to figure out how to scale this thing. So right, people can't just move one street over and keep on doing what they're doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what are some other obstacles in the implementation? So we've talked about the noise, the ordinances themselves, but what about, is there a perception of, oh well, we just get used to noise? Like we're starting to experience a bit of a culture shift where it comes to our car-centered culture. So not only just physically, the cameras themselves, but what are some of the other things that us as advocates who, whether it's a safe street advocate who knows that speed and noise are related, and if you manage noise, you manage speed. So what are some of the things that we might need to do? Like what are some of the things in the way of people actually saying that this technology works?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point. I think there's a lot of the silent majority, right? There's a lot of people that, when I go around and talk about this, everybody's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, let's do this. But one thing that often gets brought up here in New Mexico, at least, is there is a cultural aspect kind of against this. We have a lowrider culture. So everybody says, well, okay, you're the professor who's bringing out this enforcement technology. You're really, lowrider culture is very much tied with Hispanic culture. So, okay, there's obviously equity issues here, and right, you're impeding on our culture and our way of life. Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to combat that is to show data. Like, it's very much, like I said before, it's very much a street racing issue. I mean, we can show all of the captures that we have, and they're always souped up street racers, almost always, and big pickup trucks. We never actually catch low riders in excess of these decibel thresholds. So, but yeah, there needs to be community input and make sure that we're not trampling on anybody's culture or anything like that. But at the end of the day, like you said, if you're above a certain decibel threshold, it's a public health issue. So even if that's your cult, right? It's maybe a generation ago it was, well, it's my culture to smoke cigarettes. Well, that impacts everybody's health around you. So right. So
absolutely, I've heard that noise is the new secondhand smoke. That's what that is. So I got a couple questions here. So quick one, how do you enforce when cars have fake, obscured, defaced, or missing plates?
Yeah, so that's another one that is always brought up, and unfortunately that's, I think, outside of our scope. If there's a motorcycle running around with no plate on, we can't do anything, unfortunately. I will say here in Albuquerque, we actually do have an enforcement program because that's a big issue here. The police are going around and capturing anybody who doesn't have the correct plate or registration and administering fines. But yeah, that's kind of outside of our scope here, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, we got some other really great questions. So cost, let's talk about that. So I'm going to toss my questions out here. So I'm going to the Q&A. So maybe I should stop sharing here for a second. So in the Q&A, how much does this technology cost? What are people looking at?
So like I said, I'm kind of an advocate still. We're still trying to figure out if this actually takes off, how much would these cost? But our approach to it right now is, I think most fines for noise are like $100, $150, $200, kind of increasing as the number of fines increases. So our thought is that the cost would kind of come out of that fine. So we wouldn't force municipalities to put up a bunch of capital up front to purchase these units. We could work on a leasing structure where we come out, install the units, we get them up and running, and as you're issuing citations, as you're fixing this issue, then a little bit of that comes back to kind of cover our costs of actually implementing this. So that in that way, if we roll out our cameras and they don't work and we don't get any captures, well then right, the municipality doesn't have to do anything because you didn't get any value out of that. So that's our thought right now.
One of the things is, I mean, our fines here are $110, which is nothing. So there's a lot of talk about raising the fines and attaching demerit points. And also I see it as a business case. You just raise those fines and cover the cost of it. And, so that's my 2 bits on that.
Yeah, I was just, that was a good point that you brought up. With our speed cameras here in Albuquerque, they actually, it's kind of the same structure. So any speeding fines that are generated from the speed cameras, automated speed cameras, a bit of that goes back to the states, a bit goes to the vendor, but then a lot of that actually goes back to the city, and that is specifically earmarked to reinvigorate the streets. So I mean, maybe that could help with the public perception issues that you were talking about before. Any fines generated from this go back into the community to revitalize the community and let people reclaim their streets or something like that. So and that could be an interesting way to kind of get people on board with this idea.
Yeah. So I got 2 questions here from Lucas, and I'm just wondering which one here. So can you use the sound signature to identify the vehicle so that eventually you can match them when you finally capture the license plate? You got the Q&A too, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at, yeah.
So one of those 2 from Lucas that you feel, if you can read out the question then that you want to answer.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe that's a good approach. This is I talked about our approach to this, but yeah, that could be another good approach. I'm not sure.
Yep. So what would you say if an area wanted to install them? Is it, so what's the best method to get them installed? What does that look like? Is it a pilot that would go in, or a certain area that you would want to target? Or would you want to have, like, I don't know, let's say it's the sets of cameras, would you want to have them dispersed throughout the city? Like what would be to you something that would work?
Yeah, kind of realistically, from my conversations with cities across North America, probably we're at the pilot program stage. My sense is that everybody is interested, everybody wants to test it out, but taking that leap of, okay, we're going to start sending out fines and somebody's going to fight it and we're going to go to court.
Yeah.
Everybody, I think, is kind of waiting for New York City to do that.
New
That's
York City is
my
leading the
impression.
charge. Yeah.
So yeah, I think we're at the pilot program stage. Once we hopefully get to the actual implementation stage, that's another part of kind of our approach is we're actually using solar power for our different units. I know the company out of the UK is actually using hard wiring into utilities, which makes it a bit more difficult and makes the units a bit less flexible. So with that, I mean, you might install it on a corridor and it might sit there for a year and you can't really move it around. So that was something we were purposely thinking of. With it being solar powered, you can kind of strap it to a pole. As soon as people know, oh, there's sound cameras here, they move over, so you can move it over really quickly and easily. So yeah, there'll be some level of kind of scaling up, but also some level of kind of moving units around throughout communities, I think.
Yeah, that's what they do with the speed cameras, is that they move them around. Now they're big honking boxes, so you can actually see them, but still, they move them around to different wards. So often the bylaws are a municipal law or bylaw, but then there's also the provincial laws. So I'm assuming you've got city, state, federal. So do all of those laws need to match up? Like, what would be your comment on those different layers?
My understanding is that if there is a law at a higher level, that would kind of encompass that entire jurisdiction. So for instance, in the city of Albuquerque, we actually don't have a good vehicle noise ordinance, but our county has a good vehicle noise ordinance. So the city could use that county's vehicle noise ordinance. And then if, the state had a good vehicle noise ordinance, and every community, I think, could just use that. And yeah, I don't have the answers. From my understanding, everybody's trying different approaches. Like I said, Hawaii has something on the governor's desk at the state level. Other states are working more on the local level, so everybody's kind of going at it from different angles, and I don't think it's 100% clear which one is going to end up being the best quite yet.
Yeah, this is really new ground. I mean, it's funny because when I've been learning about our Toronto noise bylaws, there was actually no maximum decibel level on motorcycles until 2019. I was like, what? You mean people could do whatever they wanted to do, but again, the laws have been subjective, right from our provincial levels. So now we're understanding the output of that. I've got a great question here from Barb. She says, my question is where these cars are getting the work done, and could a blitz be done after they leave the shop? Like, wouldn't that, like, I know there's an area just north of me where they do a lot of auto body work, and I actually did a noise measurement from the house, and oh yeah, there's work being done there, and so maybe that's a good idea, eh?
Yeah, I mean, those rules are on the books as well, so yeah, maybe that's another approach. My understanding is that it's not illegal to sell modified exhausts, because technically somebody could put it on their car and then just drive around a track, which would not be illegal if it's on private property. So you can't, my understanding is you cannot kind of go after it from the manufacturer. But yeah, if somebody is working a shop where clearly people are driving out onto public roads, then yeah, maybe that's another avenue of enforcement here, definitely.
Yeah, and they're often on smaller roads, so you get your single road as well. Here's an interesting idea. What about attaching sound level meters to every red light camera?
Yeah, that's something else that's brought up a lot. Yeah, communities have been talking about, well, can we have an automated speed, red light, and noise camera? I think definitely eventually, but kind of where we're at, making sure that the noise aspect is really going to hold up in court. I think it is important to kind of have it as a separate unit and really make sure it sticks in court. And then once that precedent is kind of established, then maybe we can start thinking about integrating it into all these other technologies. So yeah, I think that one definitely eventually.
Yeah. So it sounds like just cruising through the questions here. Have you ever considered any other applications for noise cameras, such as construction sites? Has that come up?
No, I haven't thought about that. I've been pretty focused just on road noise. But yeah, I imagine you could use the same technology at other sites as well.
Yeah, because I know from my sound level meters, when I get the recordings and the graphs, it's like, well, what makes that noise? And because a sound level meter is just decibel level, so you need to pair it, and to be able to pair it with video, audio, and decibel, then suddenly we actually have something that is all that data combined, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and construction, Toronto has more cranes than any other city in North America. So let me tell you, construction is something I hear about a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So one more question here. So from Romaine, how often would you manually check and calibrate your noise cameras so they can be used for enforcement court? This operation costs and would require either qualified staff or long-term contracts.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's since I think New York City is kind of the most established program, I actually brought that up with them, and they would not tell me. So I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, it would be up to the municipality, and whatever municipality thinks would hold up in court. If you need to get a calibration every morning and every evening, or a week, or every month, yeah, I don't have the answer on that. That's definitely something that would need to be worked out though.
Yeah. So we got time for, I think, a couple more questions here. So from Derek, in Ontario, legislation was passed in 2019 to amend the Highway Traffic Act to make the modification itself an offense in section 75(1). No need to catch on the act on a public roadway. Unfortunately, they haven't proclaimed that part of the bill into force yet. Have any other jurisdictions been successful with this approach?
Not that I am aware of. Yeah, we've kind of just been focusing on catching in the act. Yeah, that's kind of definitely a feasible route for enforcement, but yeah, we haven't really gotten into that ourselves.
Yeah. I think what I'm understanding is that there's just so many layers to our laws, and we haven't actually put a stop to them in advance. So now we have to look at them and go, well, how do we need to modify? Because apparently my understanding is that a car is, like you said, they're stock. When they're stock and come off the line, they're tested for 85 decibels, but then they get put on a truck, and then suddenly the provincial laws take over. And the fact that that 85 decibel is not carried through, I asked someone about that, and what their answer was that is regulatory silos. So the federal government is regulating a product where the provincial government is then regulating the use of that product.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's where we need to bring those, we need to line all of those up. And then once we have the bylaws and the teeth and that objective way of testing, then whether it's an automatic ticket, whether it's a summons, whether it's whatever that outcome is probably dependent on the jurisdiction and what their appetite is for that.
Yep.
Let's say.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think we have kind of reached some people are saying huge fines. Yes.
Huge fines. Yep. Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
My wife always asks, can we just like attach something that just like dings their car and shoots out their tires or something? Forget the fine, just
Yeah,
make the car
disable.
inoperable.
Disable that, absolutely. Okay, so let's just get one more question in here. I have new AirPods that link to the phone and give the levels and report it in a health app to start and let people have some kind of action. If they take a picture and have earbuds in, is it possible to make your own report and present this as a preliminary to council? It wouldn't be 50 feet away, it might be a start. So that's also like the idea that if we go around with our phone and we actually manage to capture the license plate and the audio, is there anybody that I guess is kind of, you know, I kind of think in a way that citizen enforcement might be the next level, but you know, it would still need to be reviewed and all that other kind of thing. But have you heard of anything like something like that where people can submit that kind of documentation to police or the city?
I have not. Yeah, I thought about it and people bring it up. I just, you know, I can just imagine a fine being administered based on somebody taking a picture with an iPhone, and it would just get immediately thrown out in court. So I think it's a good idea,
Yeah.
but yeah, I just don't think it would stick, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That also kind of triggers something in my mind. Some people that have reached out to me fairly frequently are actually hotel owners. So their number one complaint they get every single day is it's too loud, I couldn't sleep well at your hotel. So I've actually had quite a few hotel owners approach me. And I don't know how to handle that because they don't have any enforcement power. So, okay, you can collect data, but what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of getting in the same, right, citizen monitoring. It's kind of private hotel monitoring. So I still think that could be feasible. It could at least push this forward. But yeah, I don't know what that would look like long term because there's no enforcement power there. But it's an interesting approach, maybe.
Yeah. Well, technology keeps changing, and I sometimes feel that our laws and our city ordinances and all that stuff isn't necessarily keeping up with it. And that's, I mean, our streets are used by way more than just cars and bikes these days. So, so with that, we are at 7:55, and I know that you've got kids at home and all this other good stuff, and we've got we've gone through most of the questions. So with that, I would say that so to everyone who is here, everybody who registered will get a link of the recording, and then you can contact Nick at, I can actually just share my screen once again if anybody wants to get that information.
Definitely feel free to reach out to me. Like you saw tonight, I don't have all the answers, but I've got ideas, and I'm happy to continue to help push this forward.
Yeah, well, that's awesome, Nick. So once again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your willingness to share the expertise. Share your expertise. Yeah. And so with that, we will stop recording and see if my